Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this first Finance and Governance Committee. First Finance and Governance Committee meeting of this new council. And our first order of business is the election of a new chair and vice chair of the committee. So, do I have any nominations for chair?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Charleston.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hock. Do I have any further nominations? In that case, can I have all those in favour? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Chair is warm as well.
Right, then let's move to elections for vice chair. Do I have any nominations for vice chair of the committee? Vicky?
Councillor Hock.
Fantastic. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. And are there any other nominations? All those in favour? Any against? Right, congratulations, Councillor Hock. Very good. Wonderful. Right, moving on to item 2, apologies. Receive any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We have Councillor Podger, who is substituting. We have Councillor Podger, who is substituting for Councillor Gann, and we have apologies from Councillor Last.
Thank you. Item 3, public questions or statements. Have we received any questions or statements?
None, Chair.
Thank you. 4, councillor questions and statements. Have we received any councillor questions or statements? None, Chair. Thank you. Rattling through. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting to approve as correct record and sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 6th of January 2025. It's an interesting one, I suppose, because there's a reasonable number here who were actually at that meeting. So, are we all content that these minutes are a true and fair reflection of the last meeting? Yeah. Great. We'll sign those at the end. Declarations of interest. Has anyone got any interests to declare? Okay, thank you. And then item 7, dispensations.
None have been agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. To Chairman's announcements. I don't think I have any Chairman's announcements at this time. No, and I think we're all embedded enough now that we need to go start introducing ourselves anymore. We've sort of done that a few times, so I'm very happy to leave that. Great. Item 9 then, the Outturn Budget Monitoring Report for 2024-25. Steve Bishop, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, councillors. So you have in front of you the Outturn Budget Monitoring Report for this committee.
Sorry, is your mic on, or is it just?
It is on. It's just not pointing towards my very small mouth.
Thank you.
So this is the same format that we use for. No, I'm on the wrong. Yeah, I'm on the right. Sorry. This is the same format that we adopt for all budget monitoring reports. This is your Outturn Budget Monitoring Report for this committee. You may remember, those of you that were at full council meeting, we looked at the Outturn for the whole council. So this is obviously just a subset of that. It's those cost centres and services and activities that this committee is responsible for. For the benefit of the new councillors, I'm not expecting to see this, but this gives the split of all the cost centres, services and activities by committee. So there's obviously a community services committee that's got the communities department, cost centres, environment's got environment, events, markets and grants has got most of the others, which leaves finance and governance. And I'll just quickly read out those cost centres that they are the subject of this evening's report. So democratic and council activities, information technology and telephony, officer activities, civic and mayoral activities, the finance section itself, public works loans, human resources and payroll, and then the chief exec's other centralised budgets, including the precept. So they're the activities that this committee focuses on each time we bring a budget monitoring report to you. This report in front of you this evening is looking backwards at the whole of last year and gives you the results of those activities for last year. The report is the same format as usual. It explains in section 3, for those of you who are not familiar with this particular type, most councils are fairly similar, but in some ways they're unique to themselves. So in this particular format for Salisbury, the format is always, if you look at Appendix A, that's usually all of the cost centres listed with the net actual outturn, in this case, in the third column. So going across the page, it lists those cost centres that I just read out to you. It gives you the full council budget that was approved by yourselves back in January 24. We then look at the adjusted budgets, which for last year were quite significantly different to what was approved in January because of all the changes we made during the year to try and reflect much greater, fuller costing. It's something that you councillors have been asking for a number of years, and officers certainly needed that extra level of detail in order to manage the services. So you can see quite a significant difference in some of those cost centre net budget totals between the first column of figures and the second column. And we're then showing you what the actual is. So that column marked actual expenditure or income is the true outturn for the year. And then the comparison between the adjusted budget and the actual outturn gives you the variance in pounds, which is then converted into percentages. On Appendix A, you've got the revenue cost centres at the top, which are the normal ones that I read out. And at the bottom of the page, you've got if there are any capital or one-off schemes that this committee is responsible for. And you can see that there were two. The corporate department had an IT infrastructure capital scheme of £12,000. And also during the year, the full council made the decision, it wasn't budgeted at the start of the year, but you decided that you wanted to use some community infrastructure levy receipts to make a donation of £50,000 to the Broken Bridges Nature Reserve donation. So that's Appendix A, which gives you the whole of those cost centres. And then Appendix B looks at those specific lines within the cost centres. So these are what we call account level. If there are any account level budgets that are more than £50,000 variance, then we provide those in Appendix B. And then moving back to the report, the main body of the report, section 4, gives you an explanation for each one of those budget variances that are listed on Appendix B. The only other thing worth noting, because it does vary between councils, is that anything that's red and bracketed, any figures in the appendices and quoted in the report that are red and bracketed are good. That usually means an underspend in terms of expenditure or an overachievement of income in terms of income. Anything that's black and solid is bad. It's usually an overspend of expenditure or an underachievement of income. So it's a bit of an odd convention, particularly as it's the direct opposite of what we're used to in our personal lives. So apologies for any confusion. Hopefully that's a quick whistle-stop tour. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, Councillor Sutton.
It's really just a question on looking forward. Everything in here is looking backwards. Is this unusual, or do we get a forecast of what's going to happen in the next period, albeit not necessarily over the whole year, but the next quarter, and some kind of indication whether things are looking good and there's going to be a plus arrow or a down arrow? And also, I think I would like to see what we think the risks are, the big risks that are facing us in these committee areas. So sort of a look forward and a risk-based view, which obviously is not in this report at the moment.
Very fair point. The benefit of budget monitoring is to look forward, is to compare ourselves with our plan. So all the budget is a plan. A lot of people consider a budget as money. It's clearly not money. It's just a plan approved by the council, gives us guidelines. It gives officers the license to spend money on those activities that you've given us the budget for. But the benefit of then monitoring it during the year is obviously to see if we're diverging from that plan at an early enough time so that we can make corrective action and get us back on track and at least alert you if there's going to be a problem, so you can make decisions in terms of either getting us back on track or actually being happy with it might be a positive difference or whatever. So this is unusual. It's unusual in the sense that this is the only one report during the year that looks back for the whole year, but all the other budget monitoring reports you will receive at each of your next meetings for the rest of the year will be looking forward, because that is the whole benefit of budget monitoring. The reason why you haven't got one this evening is because this year particularly, with so much pressure on trying to produce 2 sets of accounts, there was just no time to produce a May end budget monitoring report. In an ideal world, we'd have a fully automated system, and any point in time I can press a button and you'd get a budget monitoring up to date to that day of all the transactions at the council that you could compare with the budget on that day. And certainly you should get that every month, even including April. However, because it's so antiquated, the systems and processes we've got here, and we are looking into modernising those and integrating and automating more of our processes. At the moment, it takes so much time to produce 2 sets of accounts, I'd say, which should be unique to this year, that the decision was taken that we won't be producing a budget monitoring report until the end of the first quarter, which is the end of June, which would then be available to officers and councillors from the end of July onwards. From that point onwards, there will be monthly budget monitoring reports. So this is a bit of a hiatus. These first 3 months of the year is the only period in the year that there isn't a budget monitoring report. We look backwards at last year to see if that tells us anything. But from your next meeting onwards, you will be getting the most up-to-date budget monitoring report that I can produce at that point in time. It will be forward-looking. It will be predicting. So what does this mean in terms of, is this good or bad for the year end? We can try and introduce more descriptions of risks, let you know. So last year, for instance, the crematorium income, one of our major income streams, was affected by closing the crematorium for 2 months while we had to replace a roof. That clearly could have been a major risk. It was well managed, but I would expect that if that happened, it's not going to happen this year. But if something like that were to happen, we could use the budget monitoring report to explain this is what we've got to this point in time, good or bad. Looking forwards, what do we think is on the horizon that might affect expenditure or income? And officers could perhaps try and put more emphasis on that predictive element, which we haven't in the past. We've used up-to-date figures to do the so what is purely in number terms, but what perhaps we can do is explain in better terms, exactly what the risks are that we see.
Yes, please.
You want me to ask a question? Are you going to go ahead? And then we'll go to Ricky, yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Can I first of all thank Steve for laying it out in a clear way that we can understand all the outturn figures. I found it very, very clear to go through. I think it's worth, recognising that many of these budget lines are best estimates at the time. You must remember that. Nobody's got this perfect. There will be swings and roundabouts. There will be areas that we maybe get a little bit wrong. Others we don't, quite estimate the amount of income we're going to get. So I think overall, to finish up with an underspending both revenue and capital, I think congratulations need to be sent to all the management team. I think because it's obviously this is a team effort to get us into this position. And I certainly like to pass my thanks through to everybody who's got us into this position. And it's interesting, isn't it? We set a budget in sort of February, but you don't really know the outturn. Here we are, the end of almost into July. We only just know the outturn from last year's budget. And it's in comparison to this. In February, we set a budget at Wiltshire Council. We were looking at a 14 million underspend. And then last week we hear we've got a 5 million overspend. So it's, see how things can change very, very quickly. So congratulations to everybody. I think this is good news. Well done.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. Absolutely agree. That's cool.
Echo what Councillor Rogers said. Steve, my question is, this looks very impressive, but the information and technology, that's £62,000. Do you know what happened or went wrong?
So in the report, paragraph 4.13 gives you an explanation of the various components of that. So some of it is, I have to apologise, some of it is a spurious variance because of the way that in the past, all of the IT costs of the council were centralised in one place. That makes it very easy for an officer or management team to look after it properly. All the invoices automatically get coded to the correct place. But then we wanted to carve that up and give each of the respective budgets to the right departments, because the invoices, budgets are important, of course they're important, but actually it's the actuals that make the big difference. They make us bankrupt or they make us very healthy at the end of the year. It's the actual costs and the actual income that matter. So we wanted to split the central budget up to direct it to the departments where the IT was being spent, so that when the invoices came in, and we properly coded them to the correct services and departments, so that you had full costing. So you want to know what's the true cost of delivering the Guildhall, for example. If there are any IT costs relating to the Guildhall, we should post them to the Guildhall cost centre, because it's a real cost of the Guildhall. We shouldn't just dump it all centrally and then you never see, any realism to it. So I carved up the central budget the best way I could, speaking to management team colleagues. And then during the year, the actual pattern of invoices that came in and went to the different departments didn't quite reflect the way that we'd carved up the budget. So clearly, if I give a department £10,000 of that central budget and £20,000 of invoices come in against that budget, it looks like a £10,000 overspend. So part of that is explained in paragraph 413. And yet I've tried to then give you the whole council, step back. So in terms of the ITT's core cost centre, it looks like it overspent on IT. However, when you step back and you reassemble all of those IT budgets for the whole council, we'd underspent across the council. So it showed that we didn't overspend it on IT, we just didn't get the budgeting right across the different departments. So lesson learned will be much more accurate this coming year. But there were some genuine overspends. So for example, almost £10,000 was overspent on telephony. That's across the whole council because the IT budget is in one place still. And almost £10,000 unbudgeted use of consultancy for the urgent cybersecurity assistance. When you set the budget in January 24, you didn't know that there was a cybersecurity problem. When it arose during the year as a result of the CEO getting a review done, and we saw that we were very weak and there were some very urgent improvements we needed to make, then we had to just spend that there and then without having the £10,000. So there's an overspend of that in order to protect the council. So those explanations are given in 413, Councillor.
Sen?
Steve, thank you for that. I think first thing I'd probably like to say is we're getting closer and closer to having each individual cost centre nailed down with its own individual budget and its own expenditure and all the rest of it. Some of them which I've wanted for a long, long time. So I'm really pleased to see we're not there yet, but we're getting there, and we're far closer to that than we were a year ago. So I'm really pleased about that. That's excellent news. 3 questions. National insurance contributions, has that final figure been nailed down? Now, the report suggests we have nailed that figure down finally, because HMRC have accepted the number. Is that a finite number now that we can work to?
Yes and no. No, it's not. No, it's not a precise number, but we have approximated what we know the remaining voluntary disclosure we need to make. So if I can just explain why we haven't nailed that down, because clearly you want it nailed down. The reason for having to disclose to the HMRC that nobody wants to do that we haven't paid enough VAT is because as all the invoices come in, we are in the privileged position of being able to reclaim the input VAT. At least that's the standard rule. We're not allowed to do that on those services that we deliver that are called VAT exempt services, because we're not allowed to put VAT on our sales invoices to customers. So on the crematorium, for example, that's our largest VAT exempt service. So the government, years ago has decided that there shouldn't really be a tax on death or the death industry, and therefore there's no VAT on crematorium fees. So when we send an invoice to a funeral director, we don't include VAT on it. As a result of that, the government sort of fairly says that we shouldn't be able to reclaim any VAT on the invoices that we pay ourselves in the delivery of the crematorium. So if you think about printing, stationery, books, all the normal things that the crematorium, like other parts of the council, need to deliver its service, unlike the rest of the council where we can reclaim the VAT on those invoices that we're paying for, at the crematorium we can't reclaim the VAT on those. So if there's an invoice for £100 plus £20 VAT, £120 in total, if it's in a standard rated part of the council, our net cost is £100 because we reclaim the £20 extra that we paid over. If it's at the crematorium, we're not allowed to reclaim the £20, so it's in effect exactly the same invoice, except it's cost us £120. However, for the last few years, we've treated all the invoices across the council in exactly the same way. We add up all the VAT on all of those invoices we pay out, and we reclaim it from the government. And that's fine if none of them are exempt services. But of course, the crematorium is exempt. Every year we were just reclaiming VAT on invoices we weren't allowed to. I discovered that during the year in early December. We held up our hands immediately. We told the HMRC as a result of that we didn't get a penalty or a fine. They accepted our calculations for previous years. So in answer to your question, Councillor, up to the end of 23-24, we had disclosed that, we identified it, we quantified it, we sent that to the HMRC and they accepted that as a voluntary disclosure. It would take to the end, take after the year end, so now, to be able to calculate what the overclaimed amount of VAT between the 1st of April last year and the point in December in which we realised what had happened. We needed to close down the year, produce the VAT returns at the end of the year, and then we can go back and calculate. So we have put in budgetary provision to cover that. So that's the good news. It's not going to be an unforeseen cost out of the blue. However, the exact number down to the penny, we haven't managed to calculate yet, but we will be doing that in the next quarter.
And how does that affect us when we've sort of got split services? So let's say, for argument's sake, we're buying A4 photocopy paper, so we buy it in bulk, and then we ship some of that off to the Crown, won't we? How do we work? So the bit that goes to the Crown will be not subject to VAT recovery, but the other bits will. How are we with that, or have we decided just to roll with that for the moment?
Excellent question. So there's this thing called VAT partial exemption, which all organisations, all local government, all councils, there's a threshold of, I think it's £30,000 to register for VAT and also to look at partial exemption, but anyone's got turnover in excess of that needs to do a partial exemption calculation. In order to do exactly what you're suggesting, those you try and divvy up all the invoices coming in into separate files, so those marked crematorium or exempt services, they're wholly not claimable. All the ones that are wholly for a part of the business that is claimable, they're in another part. When you've done that at the end of the year, you're still left with a pile of mixed invoices where they're central overheads that cover the whole council, or they're bulk purchases where we divvy up those between the different departments. So we have to calculate, we have to carry out a partial exemption calculation based on quantum across the different departments. The HMRC accepts an approximation method, but it basically takes that total of the mixed invoices and then you multiply it by the separate output VAT income, in other words, for those different departments. And based on that ratio, you then have to also hold your hand up and give back some of that partial exemption VAT as well. But yeah, so we do that at year end as well.
Second question then, AGAR versus SORT. There was talk of the government lifting the threshold for AGAR from whatever it is, 10 to, or whatever it is, million to 15, was it? Have we had any more news on that as to what the government was doing?
Can I ask you to be patient for item 11 on the agenda, where there's a verbal update on that very subject, Councillor?
Okay. And final question, Given our reserves policy is 2 months worth of reserves, if I asked you what the general reserve figure would be today, based on that policy, what number would it be? Not to the nearest pound, but to the nearest 50k maybe.
So that was reported to full council last month. So we have got a pretty exact figure. So it's £1,692,020. So that was on Appendix D, I think it was, in your report that went to last month's council. So it's in excess of our, sorry?
General reserves.
General reserve, yes. And that's because we made an unexpected profit surplus of over £1 million, as reported to last month's full council. And going back to an earlier point a councillor made, where the budget is set in January, February in Wiltshire Council's case. You set the budget then when we didn't predict that we would make £1 million profit. So there's an inevitable question at this time of year, which is why weren't you more accurate with your prediction? Because that was a relevant piece of data that you should have had in January. And we're still going through, looking back at our predictions month on month in the different budget monitoring reports to see why we were so far up. We were very prudent. I'm naturally very prudent. It's my job to be prudent. But nevertheless, I didn't think that we were going to make £1 million profit in January. Otherwise, I would have told you that.
Bears on you then. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The CEO would just like to make a comment.
Just to add to that, when we were in Q4, I think conservatively we did expect to make a surplus. The figure of £1 million was more positive than we had predicted. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily unexpected that we were going to make a surplus, but certainly the size of that surplus was very positive for us. Particularly with what's going on across the rest of local government.
Thank you, Asa. Mac, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. My question is about the salary costs. And I just, rather like the IT costs, I wanted to know whether the variance was because of this decentralising the budget, or was it just over budgeting last year, or is it because we've struggled? Because what you're saying here is it's a combination of all of these. But is there an underlying issue about struggling to fill vacant posts? That was my question. And I appreciate that might also be the subject of a different committee. But is it just a numbers game, or is it a practical issue?
So with hindsight, the easy explanation is we over budgeted, but an element of that over budgeting is definitely going to be a number of vacancies during the year. So when setting the budget in January 24, we gave you our best prediction of what the cost of the salaries and the other overheads, national insurance, pensions, based on fully staffing all year round. So that's the most prudent way of doing it. It's unrealistic because no council really can expect to keep its posts filled all year round. So, but by budgeting at that maximum level, if there's any vacancies during the year, that clearly produces an underspend. And there is an element of the underspend that you see in front of you. The total underspend, 178,818 on salaries. An element of that is going to be vacancies. Some of them posts were more difficult to fill than others, but I don't think any of that we can really say that there was a particular post or a particular department that had real problems all year round, and that wasn't a problem for us. If those of you who are here, you might remember the summer last year where the reserves were looking very dire, and we suggested the management team should put the brakes on some expenditure. There's a recruitment freeze for about 3 months in some cases. So some of the underspend caused by vacancies was deliberate because we wanted to save as much non-essential expenditure as we could to try and replenish the reserves and not overspend by several £100,000 like the previous 2 years the council had done. So I won't bore you by going through the last month's full council, but when you look at the analysis of which elements of the budget produced the £1 million profit, the fact that gross expenditure across all the departments came in pretty much on the button, that looks like there's no success there at all. But we were looking at overspending purely on the expenditure line. So £100,000, even taking the underspend on salaries into account. And that was because things like the tree policy budget, and tree surgery, and repairs and maintenance have traditionally always been under budgeted and overspent. But when we brought that to your attention last summer, you gave a mandate to put the brakes on. There were some recruitment freezes. We made sure that repair budget had to be kept within those parameters. In terms of the salary itself, I don't think it was particularly badly calculated, but it was set at the absolute maximum. And this year, Tracy and myself, in setting this year's 25-26 budget, have been prudent, but we don't think we're out by as much as £178,000. There will be some vacancies during the year, but that's usually quite a good thing because, with your permission, we could perhaps use any underspend there if there's pressures elsewhere in the budget.
Yeah, Councillor Siddharth.
Yeah, just sort of building on a couple of points that you've said. I noticed that the next finance meeting is the 1st of September, which is nearly half the way through the financial year. I know it takes some time to do the accounts after the end of the first quarter, but it feels to me like we had a massive unexpected overspend last year. To get to nearly half a year before we can actually really consider how things are going this year. Are we facing another big overspend? Where things are going, deciding what we want to do with potentially the surplus money. It feels the timing doesn't feel exactly right. But noting the lead times for the actual account production, could potentially in September we could be saying that we're facing another massive surplus, but then nearly half the way through the year before you decide what to do with it. Am I alone in thinking that?
So it is a point very well made. So there's options. The reason for the 1st of September being the first formal budget monitoring report you get isn't because it takes me till the 1st of September to produce a budget monitoring report for this year. There will be the first budget monitoring report for this year will be available at the end of July, and it will be for the 3 months from April to June. And then at the end of August, there'll be the next budget monitoring report available internally for the end of July and then August. So you'll have the most up-to-date one. You won't just get the sort of 3-month one on the 1st of September. But the options you've got are, because those reports will be available earlier than your formal meeting. So senior management team, for example, are using those monthly budget monitoring reports in between committee meetings. This isn't the only time that budget monitoring is used. It is, but senior management are using monthly budget monitoring for internally managing their business and services. So one option you've got is in between your formal meetings, you could receive by email those more up-to-date budget monitoring reports if you're particularly interested in it. In summary terms, we often produce that, if there's an ad hoc meeting of councillors or the leader who wants to know if things are okay or whatever, we can do that informally, but there's no reason why we can't make that information available to councillors if that's something that you were interested in.
Just to sort of put my own point on this, is that as said, I suppose all the group leaders, all the party leaders meet with Lisa every week. There's an opportunity there at any point which would be taken to say, we're not going to wait until the next finance and governance meeting, the next full council, to say we're in trouble or we're not in trouble. These are conversations that happen outside of these meetings as well. So, but the point is well made and well taken, absolutely. And thank you for your comments. Sven, I think you were next. I'm conscious we're starting to go around.
Yeah, no, just sort of related, but when will budget setting season begin this year?
Happy to take this one, Chair. I will start looking at this in July. So would very much like to meet with Leeds during the month of July so that we can start this process nice and early, like we did last year. That way we can get something on the board before we enter holiday season in August. and keep to a good timetable, which I'm sure our RFO will do so very keenly. I think there are some decisions to be made about opposition groups and whether or not we want to, whether they want to create budgets or if there's a different way of looking at things. But again, officers are here to work with all the groups, and by groups I also mean independents as well, so that if there are budgets that need to be worked up, we can do so and hopefully arrive at a appropriate budget and a very good medium-term financial plan.
And yeah, and so I suppose to add to that, I think, certainly it's very important to me that everyone has the opportunity, if as Asa said, everyone has the opportunity to produce their own budget. But if we can all feed into one budget, I absolutely want to start having those conversations. And if that's where we end up, is everyone does their own, so be it. But I would like to hope that it's not the lack of opportunity to collaborate. I don't see anyone else asking. Oh, Steve, please do.
If I can just indulge you, Shane's plug for the councillor finance awareness training. I think I've sent all of you 3 slots. If you can make any of those, that would just help, because you can ask questions. It's not just me preaching to you about the way that Salisbury City Council does the budget monitoring, but also budget setting, and it gives you a bit more detail about how Salisbury does it compared to perhaps other councils, and it gives you a question and answer opportunity as well. So if there's other detail that you don't want to bother the whole committee with tonight, you can come along to one of those. Then you can ask any questions you want on finance and how we do it here at council. And it will then also help you then when you start budget setting next month.
Thank you, Steve. I would just say my own last little bit on this, which is that I think possibly for the benefit of the newer councillors as well, I think it's worth being aware, and I absolutely echo what Sven said about having the sort of granularity of seeing all these different cost centres, being able to see that and having that presented to us in this format in all of these committee meetings is a very welcome but relatively recent development, and it's very, very much appreciated, all the hard work and effort that's gone into that. And Sven said it's something he's been talking about for a long time. It's something we've been talking about as long as I've, the last 4 years that I've been a councillor, and it's really refreshing to see it. It's come, and we're getting there. We're getting to the point. I think there's a point a few years ago where the exact same question was asked in this committee: what's our reserves? And the answer was more or less sort of vague shrug. We don't really know. So to be able to have that question asked as it should be and answered as it absolutely should be is the fantastic sign of the progress that's been made. Appreciate the report, wonderful report. I'm very much enjoying seeing. I think you mentioned about making sure we get the predictions sort of close and closer as we go. I think that the 469% varies. It's in the right way. It's better than the bad way, but it'd be nice to not have that. That's what we're doing moving forward. But thank you for the report. If it's very quick, so I would like to move on.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to echo what you just said, and I think given 12 years of being a councillor as well, I think what Steve and our new CEO has picked up is an absolutely positive sign, and it's something that we are very clear, and is a question that we can ask. Given that same situation 4 or 5 years ago, not only that we didn't have any clue or wouldn't able to ask a question like that. So I think they are moving in a very good direction, and I wholeheartedly thank them. It's just saying to you, genuinely, it is in a way saving position. So I thank you and Steve for picking all this up. I think next year it will be even clearer. It will be much better, and maybe another £1 million surplus would be even better.
Yeah, we can just take that.
Right. I suggest you review the medium-term plans, then, and we'll have that conversation. Please, I hope you did. I didn't think you did, actually. That sounded very sarcastic. Right, item 10 then. Let's move on. Review of office authorisation limits. This is you again, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Much simpler. It's a fundamental but very important aspect of financial internal control, that the delegated permissions and authorities you give to officers are the minimum necessary in order to carry out the everyday functions that you've given us authority to do. Not only is, and it's not a matter of trust, I mean, when we say it's not a matter of trust, it's partly a matter of trust, but it's more about just making sure that you reduce the risks to the council, not just of officer dishonesty, but also these days with identification fraud. The bigger the authority limit that you give me, the more exposed I still suspicious identity and hacks into the computer system. So even if you trust me implicitly, if you gave me an unlimited budget, if somebody else came in as me, then suddenly all the money of the council can drop out, overnight. So we do need to try and make sure that these are as low as possible, but without them causing disruptions. So every year we bring to you an updated recommendation for the financial authorisation of officers. So that's what the report basically says. Section 4 tries to explain what the main changes being proposed this year. I can take you through those. We've given you Appendix A, is the existing financial authorisation limits, which you approved last year in July. And Appendix B has got the proposed list. And if I just quickly take you through the differences. The first box on the first page of Appendix A and B are to do with BACS. As you can probably, you're used to probably in your everyday lives, we try and pay all of our suppliers by BACS payments, the cheapest, most quickest, most direct way of paying suppliers, and we also pay the staff payroll through BACS as well. So in one file, electronically, all of those payments are made in one go. We need two people, two authorised signatories of the council. It's not something that one person can do, it requires two-person authorisation. And the existing schedule is for £200,000 limit amongst all of those senior managers. And we're asking to increase it to 300,000 because the payroll, the monthly payroll alone costs at the moment around about £240,000. That's the net pay, as well as all the payovers to HMRC, to Wiltshire Pensions, to Unison, to all of the other payovers that we need to do. So if we make all of those payments on the same day, then that's £240,000. To get around the £200,000 limit currently, we pay it over 2 days. So the net pay is less than 200,000, and the payovers another 40 to 50,000 pounds. If we do it over 2 days, we can get around the limit. But because we've outsourced payroll to Wiltshire, and it's possible that Wiltshire Council will want to pay all of that in one go, we needed to increase the limit for them. And also, if there's any particular month where they experience a problem, and we need to invoke the contingency plan, which is to go back to Salisbury, paying it direct out of our bank account, then clearly, if we're used to paying it all in one go, we need the limit to be increased. So that's the reason. It's purely, that's the BACS table. Then if we turn over to page 2 of Appendix A and B, these are individual transactions. So this isn't BACS, this isn't electronic. This is the first column of numbers is the ordinary limit. So one of the financial regulation requirements is that officers, in committing the council to any form of spend, are expected to raise a purchase order on the system that we've got. So that first column is saying how much, what's the limit to any single purchase order that any of those listed officers can make. And the final column, the second column of numbers, are for the actual authorising the payment of an invoice. And it's pretty much because if you order something for £5,000, usually an invoice for £5,000 will come in. That's why you can see it's virtually the same number across those two columns for every member of staff. As you go down the list, you can see that the officers with the highest authorisations tend to be the more senior. And as you go down the organisation, so those limits go down. That's not a question of trust. That really reflects what the level of transaction that people of the different levels are expected to do. And again, trying to make the minimum rather than say, because ASA might need 250,000, we'll give that to all officers. That clearly would be exposing the council to undue risk. In terms of the changes we've made, if I'm just comparing Appendix A and B, head of business operations was 50,000, is currently £50,000 limit. We need to increase that to £75,000 to reflect the nature of the contracts and the orders and payments that Matt enters into. The head of HR and HR manager, which is item 7 in the current list. Those have been split out, again, to try and make sure that we're only giving the higher limit to the one officer that needs it. So there's 2 lines in the proposed instead of 1 line. So that's item 9 in Appendix B, HR manager, has now been separated from head of HR. And item 11, health and safety facilities supervisor in Appendix B, is a brand new post that was created and restructured. So therefore that needs a limit now that didn't have one before. And then item 14, the operations supervisors in Appendix B, that has been increased to £10,000 to reflect the need for them to issue purchase orders and authorise the payment of invoices slightly higher than they've had to in the past. But other than that, we're suggesting that everything else stays the same. So that's the recommendation in front of you, to adopt Appendix B, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Steve, thank you for this. It's kind of a 50% jump, although I hear your explanation, but that's almost 50% of a jump from 200 to 300,000. I mean, where did you get that figure from? I mean, the 100,000 and the 25,000 extra.
It's purely because of payroll. So there's only 2 forms of BACS runs we do. We do a weekly supplier invoice payment run. That's never more than 200,000, so our existing limit is fine for that. It's purely the payroll, the monthly payroll run, which is it's about £178,000 this month, net pay. So you can do it in 2 runs. You can do one BACS payment run that pays the staff, and that, as I say, is in the sort of 160 to 180,000 pound range. That's within the 200,000, so that's fine. But the payovers, the national insurance, both the employees and the employers' national insurance, and the income tax that we deduct from people's salaries, and the Wiltshire pensions that we pay over, all of those, that's separate amounts of payments that go to those statutory bodies. That comes to about another £50,000, £60,000. So when I drafted this, I thought that Wiltshire Council would want to do all of those payments in one go, which they couldn't possibly have done under 200,000. They needed the higher BACS limit of 300,000 to be able to do that all on one day. So I had to liaise with the bank. We had to demonstrate, they had to go through a lot of due diligence checks with the bank. So that's now at 3. So we're recommending it's 300,000. The bank have accepted the BACS increasing above the 200,000 pound limit. So they're content with the extra increase. But you could go for 250 and say that's the absolute. There's no ceiling or headroom in there. That's pretty much what the total combined payroll and payovers would be now. But if you were not content with 300,000 and you wanted to go for 250, that's an option. If you really didn't want to move from the 200,000 pounds, that's still workable. It just means that both Wiltshire Council and ourselves, if we were having to invoke the contingency plan, would have to continue to spread those 2 sets of payments over 2 days to keep within that limit. So it's entirely within your gift to agree it or not. It makes our lives a little easier if it's 300,000, but it's entirely up to yourselves.
No, I think you're doing a great job, but again, that's quite a big jump. And same goes to the head of business, from 50,000 to 25,000 extra. That's another 50%. So again, similar reason or?
So in answer to your question, it's not the same answer. No, it's not connected in any way to the BACS runs. This relates to purchase orders and invoices. I think this is the head of business, Matt Hine. Now he's been here, enough months to be able to look and see what size contracts he has to place in terms of running events, running the markets. He's looked at that limit and he thinks that could cause him problems, and therefore he's asked for an increase. In terms of some other senior managers, again, it's not a question of trust, but if you're worried, clearly the chief executive officer and the RFO have got much higher limits. So I think senior managers can be trusted to have slightly higher limits than they've got currently. But again, it's within your gift. We'll work within whatever parameters you set us. If it means that ASA or I would have to authorise something that ordinarily Matt would wish to do, we could do that. It obviously just is a little less efficient than if Matt could do it himself.
Just don't want to go, I just don't want them to go on a shopping spree, that's all.
Al?
Thank you. What I see from this is a potential saving in officer time. So they only have to run the processes once on one day rather than have to run it on 2 consecutive days. So, you know, swings and roundabouts here.
Thanks, Al. Sven?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is a big thing about trust, isn't it? Because officers are asking us to put our faith in them to spend their money wisely. And if we get that wrong, then the public will come back on us and say, why on earth did you let them spend so much money in one go? So this is a big trust thing. I think I sort of know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Are there any restrictions on who our officers can pay? So if we took about 300, you want for a limit of £300,000 for payroll. What's to stop said officer saying, you know what, instead of paying that £300,000 towards Wiltshire Council payroll, I'm going to set up an account and pay, I don't know, me, for instance, or you, or Sam, or that. What, is there anything to stop someone opening up a Spearus account and transferring the money off-site into their own personal account or somewhere else?
Happy to answer this one, Chair, so Steve can have a rest. There are probably 2 points that I would make. Is that one, last year we took the limits down from unlimited to the current number that we have here, precisely for the reason that we felt unlimited was unnecessary in order to carry out our business. So one is just at least giving you a direction of travel. The second is that when we are talking about significant payment sizes for backs, we have 2 signatories that are allowed. So we end up getting an email to say this is coming into our email box that goes across all of SMT. So they all have the opportunity to go in, have a look, and to authorise accordingly. So if we're talking about significant risks, you would have to involve multiple officers in order for fraud to be committed. Not completely reducing that risk to zero, but you would have checks and balances in that process. You have more than one officer in that process, so that we can at least give some comfort that it's not just one rogue officer that has unlimited ability to sign off things.
Ricky?
I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chairman, to increase the authorisation limits.
Keith, do you have a second? Patricia? Al, you want to speak?
Yeah, just a quick one. I would also suggest that banks anti-fraud are pretty hot these days, and you usually have to prove account numbers against account names at a minimum. So that's another protection.
Can I just come back on that? How I don't think you're there as a victim of Alexa, who decided to set up a music streaming service for me without actually knowing and charging for it. And the bank allowed the money to come out of its supply every month. My trust in the banks are not quite possibly
Councillor Suddarth?
On the payroll, I've just got one question, which is, I'm a bit confused as to why every head is involved in the payroll. Is that not an HR strict finance strict CEO process? Why does every head need to be involved in that authorisation for payroll?
Apologies for not explaining it with clarity. It's not that everyone is involved in the process. We have sickness, we have annual leave, and so there are on occasions where there are only 2 or 3 members of SMT in the building or virtually in the building. So that's why we enable all of those heads of service around backs to be able to do that. Because of a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest, what we have done is taken the step to remove the head of HR from that process. So again, because of her workings with payroll, etc. So that's why we have 6 of the 7 members of SMT involved in that process. It's not they all have to sign off, it's just 2 do.
Right, I see no further questions. So we have on the table, the motion is committee approves the updated schedule of officers' financial authorisation limits in Appendix A. It has a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
It should read Appendix B because Appendix B is the proposed one. So I do apologise for that.
Let's run that again then. Strike that from the record. I don't think I'm allowed to do that. Okay, Appendix A and Appendix B. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, item 11, please. SORP accounts update.
Thank you for being so patient, councillors. At last month's full council, we convened the extraordinary full council primarily in order to bring you two sets of accounts. No council should have to produce two sets of accounts, but we're in this situation where we've gone from what's called AGAR, the Annual Governance Accounting Report, which is what all smaller authorities, all parish councils, town councils included, are in the AGAR regime, unless their turnover exceeds £6.5 million, which is set out in the Local Government Act 1972, for 3 years running. So you can have a bit of a peak if you're doing a major capital scheme, but if it's only 1 year, it doesn't automatically put you in convert you into a principal authority and move you out of the AGAR territory. But if you do it 3 years in a row above £6.5 million, then you go from being a smaller authority to a principal authority, and they're the only two types of authorities in the country. All the smaller authorities are governed by the AGAR regime, which is what Salisbury's had since 2009. But because our turnover exceeded £6.5 million for 3 years, and this is the 24-25 was the third of those years, in that year you move from AGAR to the full code, Statement of Recommended Practice, which is why we use SORP as an acronym. Other people call it full code. It means the full code of practice on local authority accounting, which is the Statement of Recommended Practice issued by SIPFA, which is the main accountancy body responsible for all of the public sector. So we moved from AGAR to SORP in 24-25. So we should have gone from bringing you the AGAR set of accounts at the end of the year to giving you the SORP set of accounts, which would look more like the set of accounts that you're used to in either private or public sector. Wiltshire Council is subject to SORP, so nearly all limited companies. So whatever your background, you're probably used to seeing a balance sheet, a profit and loss account, also known as an income expenditure account, a cash flow statement, and then perhaps 20, 30, 40 pages of notes to the accounts to try and explain all those numbers. So that's a full set of accounts, and that's what we were expecting to bring you last month. And that's because the accounts and audit regulations set out a deadline to produce the SORP by the end of May. So that's what we were working to. We were desperately trying to produce both the AGAR set of accounts and the SORP accounts for the end of May, and that's why we had the full council meeting last month. And if those of you that were at the full council meeting will know that I apologise that although we've done the AGAR accounts, we weren't able to produce the SORP accounts on time for a whole range of factors, but it was my responsibility to do that, so it's my failure. However, after that meeting, having explained that we weren't able to produce that, possibly because we didn't have an external auditor appointed, and I'm sure if we'd had one very early on, months and months ago, they would have pointed out to me that although the accounts and audit regulations specify an end of May deadline, actually last year in September, there was an amendment to the accounts and audit regs issued, and that moved the deadline from the end of May to the end of June. So having told you that we failed to make the end of May deadline, I then found out that actually it was the end of June. The chief exec and myself had a conversation about whether we were going to even bother to ask you to arrange another extraordinary full council meeting for the end of June, and we decided that no, in case I failed again, that would waste your time and be hugely embarrassing. So for the sake of 2 weeks, we could wait until the 14th of July full council meeting and bring you the SORP accounts then, if it were possible to overcome all of the time challenges we had that stopped us from doing it in May. And with the help of a local Salisbury external accountant, I'm confident that we will be bringing you a full SORP set of accounts, balance sheet, profit and loss account, the whole lot, to full council meeting next month. So that just brings you up to date in terms of our timescale. You might be asking, well, okay, that explains sort, but why did you bother doing an AGAR set of accounts when we're not in AGAR regime anymore? And the reason for that is because the latest advice we've been given, including from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, is that it's the government's plan to change the legislation before the summer recess of Parliament, issue a statutory instrument that changes the £6.5 million to either 10 million or possibly even 15 million, either of which would take us back down from being a principal authority back down to being a smaller authority and back into the AGAR regime. So although we're not in limbo, we know exactly where we are. We're under the SORP regime at the moment. We're being told by the experts and the ministry, civil servants, that there could be an SI issued before the summer recess, and it will be applied retrospectively to 24-25 accounts, which will then put us back into AGAR regime as if we'd never been a principal authority in the first place. So because of that possibility, and we were told it was the likelihood, but the Chief Exec and I have got a Teams meeting with the ministry and other bodies on Friday this week, which hopefully will give us either a higher probability or a lower probability that this is going to happen. Because it was possible, if not likely, that we would have to go back into AGAR and suddenly have to prepare a set of AGAR accounts, we decided to twin track, to do both sets of accounts. So whatever the government did or didn't do, the council would be covered. So that did come to last month's full council. You did approve, as full council, you did approve the AGAR set of accounts for 24-25. So those are done. And in fact, although we're not statutorily bound by AGAR, so we don't have to go out for public inspection, we have also advertised on the council website, like we've done every previous year when we were definitely in AGAR. We've also invited the public, anybody that's interested in the council, to look at our AGAR accounts, challenge them, ask questions, look to see, documentation, whatever. So we're doing that because if we didn't do that and then we were put back into AGAR, we'd then be criticised for not having done it, even though it wasn't a requirement back then. So as far as possible, we're trying to twin track everything. So whatever happens or doesn't happen, the council and the reputation of the council is protected as well as possible, with the exception of the fact that for 2 weeks between the end of June and the 14th of July, we are not compliant with the current legislation in terms of having a SORP set of accounts approved, for which I can only apologise again. I think that brings you up to date. That's all I can tell you. Certainly after Friday, we'll be in a much better position of knowing which way the government are likely to go. Happy to take any questions.
Sven?
So there might be a God after all then. We'll find out on Friday. I appreciate it's a colossal amount of work to do one set of accounts, let alone two. So I'm quite happy to forgive you for the extra 2 weeks. I think you've done quite a remarkable job actually to get it this far. So if somebody once you've had that call on Friday, if you could just reach out and let me know what you feel the outcome might be. And you can do that privately or publicly. I'm not going to go and blab it off to anybody. But I would just be, personally, I'd be interested to know. My second question is, I know you also went public and said, is there anybody out there who would like to see our accounts and talk them through and have a bit of insight? Did anybody at all come back and say, yes, I'd love to do that? Or was it a complete wall of silence?
My understanding is that in previous years, we didn't get any response, but that might be an exaggeration. So last year, which I do know about, we had one person, one member of the public, one council taxpayer came in, wanted to ask questions about the accounts. But I have to say, when they came in, they were mostly wanting to vent their frustration about a council tax increase. But I was able to take them through the accounts. Hopefully, we'll get more interest. Charlotte, the communications officer, is trying to do her best, but there does seem to be a lot of apathy out there.
Chair, if I may, I'm happy to, following our meeting on Friday, I'm happy to write to members of this committee and to leads as well, political leads, and give them an update on where we are in terms of those discussions. In terms of engagement, building on what the RFO said, I think I have undertaken one conversation at length with an interested member of the public, which lasted about an hour, and I think the RFO also then spoke to another person. So we make these offers. it's best practice to do so. A lot of the time we get very little feedback, but we wait to see what happens.
Any more for any more? No? Great. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Very much appreciate the update. I look forward to hearing about the outcome next Friday or thereafter. So thank you very much. So item 12, there are no matters for discussion. The time is 7:34. I'm closing the meeting now. Thank you all.